The open mic is about the unsung heroes, you know? It's about children that never get tired of playing in the mud. People come from all over the country to find a family. It's a beautiful thing about the Utah. You could go to the Utah and you could have a family, and then you could even invent your own. Everybody wanted to get around Lee after he died, you know. But it's the unsung heroes. That's really kind of where it began for me with Donna Jean Castro. She was a love. Everybody loved this gal. She was kind, she was sweet, she was affectionate, she was brilliant, she was an incredible artist and beautiful musician. Some funny stories about how we were going to run the show together at the Cafe International, but we had a breakdown. I remember one time I kicked her out of my car. We got into this argument, and she said, "Stop the car." She said, I'm getting out, and she left. I'll never forget the day when Jeff Belby and Jim McClaren walked through the door. They were a little shy, a little timid, but that's the way it is when decent folk come around. My story at the Utah begins about 1997. I had been playing some music at the Cafe International on Haight and Fillmore, and then shifted over to the Paradise Lounge on Folsom, and some folks started talking about the Utah. Gotta go to the Utah, they said, and sometime just before 97 I made my first performance and met some very interesting people. Yeah. I had just gone through a divorce. I think the only way I could have survived was to play music and to write, have a kind of catharsis, kind of cleansing. Although at the time I never realized that that's what I was doing. I just thought I liked to play and meet people and get out, and I did that week after week. I was very faithful to the open mic scene. I felt in the beginning it really touched something down deep, and I enjoyed going back home and just working on songs, and just seemed like it was a way to make a statement, to give a message of some sort. And actually all the time I think it was just a way of sort of cleansing and the build-up of a lot of the stress and maybe a lot of the toxic energy that had built up inside of me for a lot of years. I think the Hotel Utah in the beginning was a rich experience of a vibrant step into a new life. I look back on those experiences, especially the first days of meeting people, making new friends. Those first days are very important, very powerful days. I remember them first days at the Utah when I showed up. There was this MC by the name of Cherie. She was a little scary. She was a strong woman, but she was only there for a short time. She went into the army, but I met a lot of her friends. I remember one, Jasmine, incredible. She went into the army too, but those were the first days. And after that, Donna Jean Castro came in, and Donna and I became great friends. In fact, she worked for me for a while, and we had our problems. in the beginning. Some funny stories about how we were going to run the show together at the Cafe International, but we had a breakdown. I remember one time I kicked her out of my car. We got into this argument, and she said, "Stop the car." She said, I'm getting out. And she left and walked to wherever, took a bus. But we got together after that, and since we were the spiritual kin, we talked through it, we prayed about it, we became great friends. And she's living right now in Pennsylvania, about 5 hours from here. I'm in upstate New York, and one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to visit her. She's got a couple of kids, and that's really kind of where it began for me with Donna Jean Castro. She was a love. Everybody loved this gal. She was kind, she was sweet, she was affectionate, she was brilliant, she was an incredible artist and beautiful musician. Had kind of a country, northeast sort of traditional farmer feel to it, and she was always singing about nature and about animals, and loving person. I admire her very much, Donna Jean. Yeah. In that first year, a sweet little family got put together. I remember first people I met was Laura at the bar. And then a few months later, Djmbe Coan came. He was very intense, but boy, he could put together some rhythms on that djembe just to rock your world. He played with everybody. And Dave was masterful on so many different levels. It was amazing, but it was quiet with a lot of people. I'll never forget the day when Jeff Belby and Jim McClaren walked through the door. They were a little shy, a little timid, but that's the way it is when decent folk come around. They're never in your face the way so many other people. They just laid back, and that was their story. They're like the cement that lays under them heavy bricks and broken stones, one of which I believe is giving you this report. And they brought a level of love and compassion through their willingness to show themselves even when they were uncertain. Jeff was struggling with his songs, "Let it rain, let it rain, let it rain." And then he picked up the mandolin, started to really wake up. But he had a way of playing with people. He had a way of putting people together and sort of bringing the music forth, and in such a I learned a lot when I watched him, because he laid back and he was gentle. He was a force of ensemble that taught me many lessons. And Jim McClaren, he'd play his harmonica behind everybody. He loved that instrument. You could see the love poured right out through him, but he loved Dylan. And when he played Bob Dylan, I'll tell you, half the time I would rather listen to Jim McClaren play a rendition of Bob Dylan than listen to Dylan himself half the time. And we loved Jimmy for what he could do, but it was his soul and his sweet spirit, both of them. They were always happy, always kind-hearted. They were the cement that glued together and brought healing to many hundreds and hundreds of people that was to come through in the years following. And I was very blessed and very touched to be in their presence. Yes, I was. I remember Lee. Yeah, Lee. Lee's a good story. Lee's a really good story, but especially in the beginning, before anybody really knew what he was about, who he was. Jeff Cotton. Jeff Cotton came in about '98. He came over from the Utah. He was running the Lost and Found. He came over with Lee Mallory. I remember when I met him at the bar, Laura served us. We became instant friends. Until later somebody put a bug in his ear. But we still stayed friends. Eventually the bug flew away. I started dating a very attractive lady that everybody else wanted, and put me on the outs. But it was good. Those were good times. We started going over to the Lost and Found, and we really cemented a friendship between us. This beginning of this little family. And Lee, quiet old Lee, he'd stand by himself most of the time. Nobody even so much as say a word to him. Maybe, "Hi, Lee." Had no idea who Lee was. Yeah, we'd heard some things, but really Lee was... The only way he could speak to anybody was through his guitar and through his voice and through his music. He had no social skills. He is shy man. But I met Lee. I met him way back. We became good friends. And I'm proud and happy to say we were good friends at a time when nobody paid much attention to him. In a sense, I guess, I had Lee all to myself for some years, and others who came, they began to see something in Lee, and many people helped him out. Many people would drive him miles and miles. He never had a car. He'd be waiting bus stops in the rain, I remember, and a lot of folks that came in to our little family, they did take a liking to Lee. And he supported everybody, and in the end, man, Lee had shown the world who he really was and why he was a flower child and why a movement took place that changed the world in the 60s, and I think he was a major part of it. I really do. Good old Lee. The open mic is about the unsung heroes, you know. It's about children that never get tired of playing in the mud. Everybody out there, I make a mess. Everybody, yeah, it's the story of my life. Everybody out there looking for a little fame, you know. Lee, everybody wanted to get around Lee after he died, you know. But it's the unsung heroes. Laura, she tended the bar. She was no musician, but boy, she loved our music. So much so that when things started to break down at the Utah at one point and changed hands, and we started shifting over on Wednesday over to Jeff Cotton's place over at the Lost and Found, she came over with us. She quit her job and she said, "I just want to be with you. I love you guys. I love you people. I love your music." Man, that told us something. When Laura decided to quit her job, we knew that something had formed. And you know, that was the same energy that formed back in the 60s. And Lee Mallory had a lot to do with being the quiet undercurrent that caused that kind of dynamic to take place. Even though other people may have had no idea what was happening, it was happening nonetheless, and it happened to us. And that was our gig. We would still go to the Utah on Monday, but Wednesday became our gig. Music was a lot heavier, a lot hotter. We were working hard to develop our songs. We started to ensemble, and something occurred for me when I noticed that amidst all the microphone knocks and the people laughing and nobody paying attention, the struggles of trying to find each other and play with each other became a concept that I called the Naked Underground. It had nothing to do with making it perfect in a studio. It had nothing to do with being famous. It had to do with kind of a reality-based struggle, improvisation, a documentary, if you will, on making music with other people live. without rehearsal, without practice, just listening to their music, listening to their stuff, and seeing if you could follow along. And I remember that Mike Toth used to talk about the patterns. How do you do it, Mike? I used to watch him just playing quietly. He'd just be there with you. How do you do it? He says, I listen for the patterns, he said. A lot of little lessons like that all along the way. We became part of a subculture of artists and musicians. There was a lot of love, a lot of cement, a lot of heart, a lot of soul. Yeah. A lot of soul. And I got to tell you about Alex Muscat. Let's see if my machine is still working here. Yeah, okay. Alex Muscat, yeah. Now, me and Alex go back, what, 95, 96 at the Paradise Lounge. We used to hang out there and experiment and explore. And I liked Alex. We liked each other. We were really good friends. Unfortunately, this became a love-hate thing. That's when Enor was playing with Channel 23, and he was, oh, talk about prodigies. And Alex, people shied away from Alex because his music was driving, it was hard, and he's a businessman. And he was a little bit on the, he had an edge. But I loved it, man. I loved that edge. And he came on eventually over to the Utah, but his business was in producing. His passion, he graduated from Berklee School of Music, and he just wanted to be with the machines and technology. And I was building it over at the Utah, and he was building it in the studio. And when he finally did come over, I felt so proud because I felt like I had built something for this friend, and bring him in, and he could meet these people and work with the family and work with the group, and he did. And many people came to respect and admire Alex for the work that he did to help them get their albums put together and their CDs. And eventually we had a breakdown, and what was beautiful about the breakdowns that we learned was that sometimes there were people you just, for some reason, it was going to go south. And when it did, you know, you could be with them without holding on to all this negative, without showing contempt. Basically, you just respected everybody. That's what we had in our family. There was no backbiting. There was no sense of warfare. When somebody was out, they just minded their own business, and they had their mutual friends, you know. And I love that about this group, that you could be in disagreement with people. Keith Savage, I had a breakdown with Keith, many people did, and yet Keith and I we'd be in each other's presence without hostility. And this was very, very wonderful, because that's what life is about, you know. There's all kinds of people out there, and can you work together? Can you choose your friends? Do you have to be in political alignment with everybody? You have to beat them up when you have breakdowns, or even serious breakdowns. No. No. No, the real power is mutual honor and mutual respect. When there's a breakdown in respect, then you move to a little wider distance. Unfortunately, it's the distance that can become lethal more than anything else. In the words of the famous apostle Paul, he said, "Love conquers all." And that's what we maintained in our, I call it a family, because many of us, we needed a family. People come from all over the country to find a family. It's a beautiful thing about the Utah. You could go to the Utah and you could have a family, and then you could even invent your own. And also at the same time, looking at the older ones that had formed this family, some decent family dynamics. That's what we had. we had some good family dynamics. That's what I'm proud of most. And yeah.